Dawn always arrived gently in Ironcliff territory, and every morning the wolves gathered. Not for the quiet, but to watch Alara Frostwind walk. Her red cloak stood out against the gray woods like a wound that refused to close, a daily, living punishment. She kept her eyes on the path, counting. 32 steps to where the first spit landed. 109 to the bend where the pack blocked the sun. Traitor blood, they'd hiss. Moon poison witch. Alara never flinched. She walked this road every day to pay a debt that could never be paid. At the gates of Ironcliff Manor, the beta's words were always the same. The Alpha will not see you. Behind those walls, Alpha Kale Thornful was wasting away. Rumors said he was feral, that he sat in the dark, unable to even see the moon. You hate me, she thought. But he is dying, and I'm the only one who can save him. Today she turned away. But something had changed. If Kale would not face her in daylight, she would stop asking permission. She would stop walking their path of punishment, and start walking the one that could save him. And to understand why she'd risk it all for the Alpha who despised her, you have to go back to the charming warlock who taught her pack to poison a king. Subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. It didn't start with blood. That was the lie everyone told afterward, because blood was easier to understand than influence. Easier than admitting that a pack could be guided into ruin one gentle touch at a time. It started with Valor's smile, warm as firelight, soft as snowfall, and just as dangerous as either if you trusted it too long. He came to Frostwind territory in the early winter, when hunger turned pride thin and the northern winds made every border feel like a knifeline. The Frostwind pack had already been limping, then fields failing, trade shrinking, alliances thinning like old thread. Their Alpha had been sick for months. Their Beta was young. Their council argued in circles until the smoke in the longhouse tasted bitter. They needed a miracle. So, when a stranger arrived with clean hands and bright eyes, saying he could help, they didn't ask the right questions. Valor spoke like he'd memorized what wolves wanted to hear. He praised their strength. He mourned their hardships. He called them noble, unfairly abandoned, the true guardians of the North. He listened to their grievances as if each complaint were sacred. And when he looked at Alara, quiet Alara, healer-born, Omega-marked, always half a step outside the pack's hunger for power, his attention felt like sunlight on skin that had forgotten warmth. You carried too much sorrow for someone so young, he said once, watching her grind herbs beneath the healer's awning. You patch everyone else and leave yourself to bleed. Alara had laughed small and nervous. That's a healer's job. Valor's gaze stayed on her, unblinking, intimate in a way that made her pulse stumble. No, he murmured. That's what they take from you. He was good at that. At naming a pain you'd never spoken aloud. At offering a hand and making you believe it was your idea to reach for it. For weeks he lingered in Frostwind lands, helping with hunts, mending fences with strange, clean magic that didn't smell like poison at first. He fixed a broken leg on an elder Wolf with a touch. He restored sick livestock with whispered words. He made the council feel less frightened. He made the Alpha weak, trembling, fading sleep without coughing up blood for the first time in a month. They called him blessed. They called him gift. And when whispers rose that the southern pack's Ironcliff among them had cut Frostwind out on purpose, condemning them to starve, Valor didn't argue. He agreed. He sat beside the council fire, and spoke gently about injustice, about balance, about what was owed. You do not have to be victims, he said. Not when the moon still rises for you. Not when strength still lives in your bones. Someone asked the question that should have been a warning. And what would you have us do? Valor's smile barely changed. Take back what's been stolen, he replied. And make them understand that the North does not kneel. Alara remembered the night that broke everything. It was late. The camp was quiet. Snow tapped softly at the hide walls. She was returning from a birthing den, hands still smelling of blood and milk, hair damp from steam, when she saw Valor standing alone beneath the skeletal branches of a dead pine. He wasn't shivering. He wasn't cold. Moonlight spilled over him like he belonged to it. Alara, he said, and her name sounded like a secret between teeth. Come. She should have gone back. She should have told someone. She should have trusted the wrongness that flickered in her belly like a warning ember. Instead, she stepped closer. He held out a small vial, black glass, sealed with wax stamped in a crescent mark. This is moonbane, he told her, voice low. Rare. Ancient. Not death, no. Something quieter. Alara's healer instincts flared sharp. Moonbane is a toxin. Yes, Valor said softly, as if that word meant nothing. And sometimes toxins are tools. Sometimes pain is a message. Her fingers didn't close around the vial, but she couldn't look away from it. The glass seemed to drink the moonlight. Why are you showing me this? Because you're the only one with the knowledge to prepare it properly, he answered. And because you're the only one whose hands are trusted. Alara stared at him, heart beating too fast. Trusted by who? His smile thinned. By everyone who believes you're harmless. The words landed like a slap dressed as praise. Ilara's throat tightened. Valor, what are you planning? He stepped closer until she could smell him warm spice beneath winter air, a scent that made the pack's wolves relax around him without realizing why. I'm planning to end a war before it begins, he said. Ironcliff's alpha Kale Thornful stands in the way of peace. He's the spine holding the Southern Alliance together. Break him, and the packs will stop marching north. Break him, and Frostwind won't starve. Alara's voice came out rough. You want to poison an alpha. I want to stop an alpha, Valor corrected gently. And I want to do it without slaughter. The vial hovered between them like a decision. This isn't peace, Alara whispered. Valor lifted his hand, just 2 fingers, and brushed a stray piece of hair from her cheek with unbearable tenderness. Alara froze at the intimacy. His touch felt right, comforting, like belonging. That's because you've been taught that peace only comes after suffering, he murmured. But I'm offering you another path. His fingers lingered at her jaw. You're a healer, Alara. You understand balance. A controlled wound now prevents a massacre later. Her mind fought. Her instincts twisted. She thought of Frostwind pups with hollow bellies. Elders with brittle bones. The alpha coughing blood into snow. The council's desperation, sharp as hunger. And Valor always there, always steady, always speaking as if he cared. Alara didn't understand then that caring could be an instrument. That a voice could be a leash. Valor's eyes held hers. Help me, he said. Help your pack survive. It took 3 days for the plan to become real. A summit was arranged under the banner of Negotiation Neutral Ground, a stone hall belonging to a lesser border pack sworn to none. The council called it a chance to secure trade, to plead Frostwind's case, to ask Ironcliff and its allies for aid through winter. Alara was brought as healer, because healers were allowed close, even when claws were bared. She remembered the hall, long, cold, torchlit. The stink of wet fur and suspicion. The scrape of boots on stone. The low, constant sound of wolves not quite growling, but ready to. And then Kale Thornful arrived. He didn't look like the monster Ironcliff whispered about later. He looked like a storm-given skin. Tall. Broad-shouldered. Dark hair falling loose near his brow. Eyes the color of iron and water-cold at first glance, but alive with something sharp beneath. His presence hit the room like gravity. Wolves straightened without meaning to. Conversation thinned. Even Frostwind's pride went quieter. Kale's gaze swept the hall once, assessing, measuring, judging. When his eyes landed briefly on Alara, something in her chest pulled tight, quick and strange, like a thread being tugged. It wasn't the mate bond. Not yet. It was something simpler. The awareness that this Wolf had survived 1,000 battles inside his own mind, and still walked like he feared nothing. He spoke politely. He offered terms. He didn't insult Frostwind directly. And that almost made it worse, because it meant he didn't see them as worthy enemies. Only problems. The meeting stretched on, tense and brittle. Words sharpened. Accusations surfaced. The Frostwind Council grew angrier, more desperate, and Velar sitting behind them like an advisor leaned in close, whispering things only they could hear. Alara watched him work the room without ever raising his voice. When the time came, she felt it like a shift in air. Valar's hand brushed her elbow as she moved behind the council benches. Now, he murmured, so quiet she almost convinced herself she imagined it. Alara's pouch held what Valar had prepared, moonbane diluted, disguised among herbs meant to ease tension and steady a leader's nerves. It was meant to be slipped into Kale's drink during the ceremonial cup exchange. A healer could do it. A healer would never be suspected. Alara's hands shook as she approached the table where the cups waited. She told herself she could refuse. She told herself she could drop the pouch, spill everything, scream the truth. But Valar's earlier words wrapped around her thoughts like vines. A controlled wound now prevents a massacre later. Help your pack survive. Peace doesn't have to mean slaughter. And deeper than words, something else pressed on her. Subtle, constant, like a suggestion you mistook for your own idea. Alara didn't understand enchantment then. Not really. She only understood that her fear felt muffled. That her conscience sounded far away. She tipped the powder into Kale's cup. It vanished without a trace. Kale lifted the cup. His gaze flicked across the Frostwind Council, assessing them with a warrior's calm. Then he drank. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Ilara's lungs refused to work. The hall seemed to hold its breath with her. Kale set the cup down. His jaw tightened. Just slightly. His nostrils flared as if he'd scented something wrong. His gaze snapped once to Alara, sharp, piercing. And for a terrifying second, she thought he'd caught her. But then his eyes unfocused. Not fully. Not yet. Just a faint, unsettling drift. Kale blinked once. Twice. His fingers flexed against the table edge, knuckles whitening. Alpha? One of his wolves asked sharply. Kale's face hardened. Pride flared. I'm fine. He stood too quickly. Chair scraping. The sound cut across the hall like a blade. Wolves rose instinctively, bodies tense, ready for violence. Kale steadied himself with one hand. His other hand clenched, then relaxed. He stared at the torch flames as if they'd moved somewhere he hadn't expected. His voice came low. This meeting is over. And then he walked out stiff-backed, controlled, furious, leaving confusion and suspicion in his wake. The war began anyway. Not the way Valar promised. Not clean. Not controlled. Ironcliff withdrew. Enraged and humiliated. Accusations spread across territories like wildfire. Frostwind was branded treacherous. Trade collapsed. Border packs chose sides. Skirmishes erupted in snowfields and pine valleys. Bodies appeared in ravines. Howls echoed at night like grief-given teeth. And all the while the poison worked. Moonbane didn't kill Kale Thornfall. It did something crueler. It dimmed his sight in stages, first blur, then shadow, then darkness. It dulled his senses, stole the sharp edge of instinct that made an alpha feel like an alpha. It left him trapped inside his own skull while the world became muffled and wrong. The Ironcliff Pack didn't announce it. They hid it. Because an alpha who couldn't see was an alpha other packs would challenge. An alpha who couldn't sense weakness coming was a territory waiting to be taken. So Ironcliff sealed their leader away and the manor curtains drawn. Torches snuffed. Rooms kept dark so he wouldn't have to watch his own failure in flickering light. And Kale once feared, once revered, became a rumor. Meanwhile, Frostwind fell apart. Valar didn't stay to face the consequences he'd set in motion. He vanished like smoke the moment the territories turned on them. Some said he died. Some said he fled. Some swore they saw him smiling at the edge of a battlefield, untouched by arrows and grief. Alara didn't know which was true. What she knew was this. When the enchantment finally cracked, when Valar's influence loosened enough for her mind to feel like her own again, she woke one morning with blood under her nails she didn't remember spilling, and a grief so enormous she couldn't swallow. Her pack had done monstrous things. Some had wanted to. Some had been pushed. Some had been charmed into believing they were heroes. Elara had helped. That was the part she could never outrun. She hadn't swung a blade. She hadn't burned a village. But she had tipped poison into a cup and watched an alpha's eyes lose focus. And that, in Elara's mind, made her just as guilty. So when the war ended, when Valor was finally hunted down, and the spellwork tied to him began to unravel, Elara did the only thing she could think of. She went to Ironcliff. Not with excuses. Not with demands for understanding. With herbs. With salves. With the knowledge of toxins and antidotes passed through healer lines. With a body that could be hit and spat on and still keep walking. The first day they threw snow packed hard as stone. The second day, rotten food. By the 7th, the crowd had formed a habit. By the 14th, the habit had become a ceremony. And every morning Elara counted her steps because numbers didn't argue. Numbers didn't hate her. Numbers didn't look at her like she was filth-wearing skin. Numbers were honest. They led her back to the gates. They led her back to refusal. They led her back to the truth Ironcliff didn't want to admit. Their alpha was fading in the dark, and pride was killing him faster than poison ever could. That was why, when she reached the tree line today, and the last insult died behind her, she didn't keep walking home. She turned her face toward the manor again, toward stone walls and iron gates and a darkness that wasn't just absence of light, but the deliberate choice to hide a wound until it rotted. Elara pulled her crimson cloak tighter, breath frosting in front of her lips. Tonight, she would stop being a spectacle on the road. Tonight, she would become a trespasser. Because if Cale Thornful wouldn't let her save him in daylight, if he'd rather rot than accept a Frostwind's help, then she would go where the pack couldn't follow. Into the manor's shadow. Into the Alpha's sealed silence. Into the dark. And when the sun finally sank and Ironcliff's wolves retreated to dens and duty, Elara waited until the woods went still. Until even the owls seemed to listen. Then she stepped from the trees and began to move toward the iron gates, quiet as guilt, steady as prayer. No longer counting the steps of her shame, but the steps of her decision. Elara waited until the manor's last lanterns dimmed and the patrol paths shifted until Ironcliff's wolves stopped moving like watchful blades and started moving like tired bodies headed for sleep. Only then did she step out from the trees. Ironcliff Manor loomed ahead, a block of ancient stone crouched beneath the bruised sky. Its windows were dark, not like a home at rest, but like something intentionally blinded. Even the wind seemed to thin near it, as if sound did not belong inside those walls. Elara moved low and careful through frost-wet grass, using the deeper shadows cast by the outer pines. Her cloak red as fresh spilled wine would have been a beacon in daylight. At night, it became a smear of darkness sliding between trunks. Every footfall felt too loud. Every breath felt like a confession. She crossed the first boundary line where Ironcliff's wards once would have flared, against trespass older magic that still hummed faintly in the stone, now cracked and tired. No alarms screamed. No patrol called out. The manor accepted her like it accepted everything else, coldly, silently, without mercy. She found a narrow service arch half hidden by ivy and a broken statue's shoulder. The lock had been repaired twice. The hinges oiled. Ironcliff didn't lack resources. It lacked trust. Elara slipped a thin bone pin from her hair and worked it into the mechanism with a healer's patient steady, precise, hands used to delicate pressure. The lock clicked softly, almost relieved. She eased herself inside. The manor's interior smelled of stone dust, old smoke, and something sharper beneath, something medicinal and bitter, like crushed nightshade left too long on a tongue. Moonbane. Even diluted, even aged, it left a signature. Elara's stomach tightened. The hall swallowed her, narrow and tall and too quiet. Tapestries hung like dark water. Floorboards creaked in places where no one walked anymore. The torches on the walls were unlit. Ironcliff wasn't saving oil. It was hiding him. Elara guided herself by memory of rumor. Highest tower, back wing. the chambers sealed away from common traffic. She climbed staircases that spiraled tighter the higher she went, each step colder than the last, until her fingertips went numb against the stone rail. She passed doors she didn't open. She passed a guard post empty. At the final landing, the air changed. It turned heavier. Warmer. Alive. Alara stopped dead. A scent hit her like a hand over the mouth, iron and pine resin, smoke and winter. And something else beneath it, something so intimate it made her vision spark. Alpha. But not just any alpha. Her lungs seized. The world narrowed to a single brutal certainty that crashed through her like a wave-breaking bone. Mate. The bond detonated so violently that for a heartbeat she forgot how to stand. Her knees threatened to fold. Heat bloomed under her skin, fierce and humiliating, as if her body had been waiting for this moment since birth and now couldn't contain its recognition. No. No, no. Alara pressed a hand to the wall, fingers digging into cold stone. Her heartbeat roared in her ears. The bond pulled like a chain sunk into her ribs, dragging her toward the door at the end of the corridor. She took one step, then another. Each footfall felt like stepping deeper into a dream she didn't deserve. The door was half ajar. Darkness leaked from it, thick as ink. Alara pushed it wider, barely breathing. Inside, the chamber was cavernous curtains drawn over the windows. Fire cold in the hearth, the air perfumed with medicinal herbs and something faintly metallic. A single candle burned on a table near the bed, its flame tiny, stubborn, and terrified. On the bed sat a man. Cale Thornful. He looked wrong and unmistakable at the same time, like a statue that had been struck in the face and still refused to crumble. His shoulders were broader than memory allowed. His hair fell uncombed around his brow. His jaw was clenched so tightly that his cheek muscles trembled. And his eyes, Alara's throat closed. His eyes did not track the candlelight. They stared through it. Blindness sat in them like winter in a dead field. He turned his head sharply. Not toward the door exactly, but toward the shift in air, toward her presence, as if his body could feel her in the room even if his eyes could not. Who's there? His voice was low and rough, stripped of court polish. Speak. Alara froze. Her mind flashed backward, Valor and moonlight, Valor's hand on her cheek, Valor's voice threading through her thoughts like silk. Help me. Peace. Trust. A trap made of tenderness. Alara's mouth opened, but no sound came. Not because she couldn't speak, because if she did, she feared the bond would expose her completely. Her name would fall out. Her bloodline. Her guilt. Cale shifted, a predator in stillness. I can smell you, he said softly. Not well, but enough. You're Wolf. Alara's pulse thudded. He couldn't identify her. Not yet. Moonbane dulled everything. And still he sensed her. The bond tugged again. Fierce, demanding. Alara felt her body lean toward him without permission. She hated it. Hated herself for the way her skin ached with recognition. Cale's fingers tightened around the blanket on his lap. If you're here to kill me, do it, he murmured. If you're here to mock me, leave. I have no patience for coward games. Coward. The word hit too close. Alara's breath stuttered. Her gaze dropped to the candle, to the small circle of light trembling on the floor. In that little glow she saw her own hands, scratched, bruised, healer's hands made guilty by one vial of poison. The bond didn't care. Her body didn't care. It only knew him. That terrified her more than the wolves outside ever had. Cale angled his head, listening. You're still there. Alara stepped back one step, then two, fighting the pull with every nerve. She backed toward the door as if distance could break fate's grip. Cale's voice sharpened. Wait. The command wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Alpha authority slid under her skin and took hold of her instincts like a hook. Alara's knees nearly buckled. Her Wolf deep, half-sleeping, wanted to submit. Alara forced herself to keep moving. She turned and fled. She didn't stop until she was out of the tower, down the stairs, back in the manor's lower levels where the air felt less charged. Her hands shook. Her vision blurred with panic. Mate. Cale Thornful was her mate. The alpha blinded by poison her pack had helped deliver. The alpha who hated Frostwind blood enough to rot alone in darkness, rather than accept their healer. Ilara's chest burned. She couldn't think. Couldn't breathe. The bond pulled behind her like a leash, begging her to turn back. Instead, she ran harder. She burst out into the cold night through the service arch, lungs ripping, cloak snapping behind her like a banner. She shifted the moment she hit the tree line. Bones lengthened. Skin tore into fur. The world sharpened. The forest bloomed in scent and sound. Wolf form was easier. Simpler. No face to be recognized. No mouth to betray her. She sprinted through frost and shadow, trying to outrun the pull in her ribs. And then, metal snapped. Pain exploded up her leg so viciously that her body slammed into the ground. Steel teeth clamped around her forelimb. The trap's chain yanked tight, jerking her back like she'd been caught by the throat. Ilara howled. The sound tore out of her before she could stop it, raw, desperate, loud enough to carry through the trees. Blood spread hot beneath her fur, steaming in the cold air. Panic surged, choking. She fought the trap, teeth bared, but every movement drove the teeth deeper. She could already picture what would happen if an Ironcliff patrol found her. A Frostwind Wolf on their border. Bleeding. Trespassing. They wouldn't ask questions. They'd finish the job. Ilara's vision tunneled. She tried to shift back to use hands to pry the jaws open, but the moment she reached human form, something inside her mind slammed shut. A wall. Not physical. Psychological. The same suffocating pressure she'd felt during Vaylor's influence, like invisible fingers twisting her thoughts into knots. You can't. You don't deserve to. Stay small. Stay silent. Stay punished. Ilara whined, fighting back another scream, trapped in fur and agony. Footsteps approached. Not many. One set. Heavy. Controlled. Fast. Ilara tensed, ready to bite even if it meant death. A shape emerged between the trees, tall, broad, moving with the certainty of a predator that didn't need sight to know where it was going. Cale. Ilara's Wolf instinct surged, confused and terrified. The mate bond flared again, unbearable even through pain. Cale stopped a few paces away. His head turned slightly, as if he could smell the blood, the metal, the fear. So, he said quietly, voice like gravel. You were real. Ilara tried to drag herself back, but the chain bit hard, yanking her forward with a metallic scrape. Cale's posture shifted, subtle. Dangerous. Don't, he warned. The command hit her like a blow. Alpha presence rolled off him, heavy as storm pressure. Even poisoned, even blind, it was there. It pressed her Wolf down into submission, making her belly want to show, making her throat want to lower. Ilara shook, furious with herself, and obeyed. Cale stepped closer, careful now. Easy, he murmured, and the words sounded almost gentle. I'm not going to hurt you. Ilara's lips curled anyway, a weak attempt at defiance. Pain made her stupid. Fear made her desperate. Cale crouched beside the trap. His hands found the chain, the spring lever, the iron teeth slick with her blood. His fingers moved with practiced familiarity, someone who'd set traps before. Someone who'd also been caught by them. He gritted his teeth, jaw tightening. Who put this so close to the manor? He muttered, more to himself than to her. Idiots. He shifted his grip, braced, and wrenched the mechanism open. The teeth released with a wet snap. Ilara collapsed, panting, trembling violently. Blood pumped from punctures. Her leg throbbed like fire. Cale didn't hesitate. He slid an arm beneath her chest, and another beneath her hindquarters. His grip was strong, sure. Ilara stiffened. Being carried was humiliation. But he was careful. Protective. And the bond. The bond surged so fiercely that her Wolf whined and pressed instinctively into his chest, seeking warmth like it belonged there. Cale froze for a fraction of a breath. Then his jaw tightened, and he lifted her fully against him. He carried her through the woods toward the manor with the smooth strength of an alpha used to bearing weight. Alara lay rigid in his arms, heart hammering, unable to reconcile the hatred she'd known by day with this silent, fierce protection by night. Cale spoke softly as he walked. "You're an intruder," he said. "But you're also injured. So don't make me regret this." Alara's ears flicked. The threat was thin, more habit than intent. They reached the manor's edge. Cale found the service arch without slowing memorized route, familiar terrain. The door creaked. Cold stone air swallowed them. He carried her into the lower wing, into a room that smelled of herbs and clean cloth. A healer's room. Ironcliff had one. Of course they did. Just not one he trusted enough to touch him. Cale laid Alara on a pallet near the hearth, and fumbled for supplies by memory bandages, antiseptic, a bowl. His movements were sharp, frustrated by blindness. Alara watched him struggle and something in her chest twisted. He was an alpha. And he was vulnerable in ways no one should have been allowed to witness. Cale's hands hovered, uncertain. "I can't see how bad it is," he muttered, anger flaring. "Damn it." Alara dragged herself forward with her good leg and nudged his wrist with her nose, guiding his hand to the wound. Cale startled. His fingers touched her fur, then the torn flesh beneath. He hissed through his teeth. "You're helping me," he said, voice careful, as if the concept offended him. "Why?" Alara couldn't answer. She didn't have words in this form. And even if she had, the truth would destroy them both. Cale's hand lingered on her foreleg, the touch unexpectedly gentle. "Fine," he muttered. "Then we do this your way." He cleaned the wound with grim precision, jaw clenched. Wrapped it tight. His hands trembled once, then steadied. When he finished, he sat back against the wall, breathing hard as if he'd fought a battle. Alara lay still, exhausted, blood loss making the room tilt. Cale spoke into the quiet, voice rougher now. "I shouldn't have come out there," he said. "I knew it was a trap. I knew it could be bait." Alara's ears flicked. Cale's mouth twisted. "And yet I heard you and my body moved before my pride could stop it." He swallowed. The sound was small in the room. Pathetic. Alara lifted her head and pressed it lightly against his knee. A silent refusal. Cale went rigid, then slowly, like the movement cost him, he rested his hand on her head. The touch was warm. It shouldn't have meant anything. It meant everything. Hours passed in a strange hush. Cale dozed sitting up, head tipped back against stone, his hand still in her fur as if letting go would cost him something. Alara lay beside him, pain pulsing, mind spinning. The wall in her mind cracked, a thin seam opening. Alara's body shuddered. Moans shifted. Fur retreated. She clamped a hand over her mouth to keep from making a sound as she returned half-naked, shaking human again for the first time since the trap. She stared at Cale. He slept. His face in candlelight looked younger than rumor allowed. Exhaustion carved shadows beneath his eyes. Pride sat on him like armor he couldn't remove even in rest. Alara's gaze dropped to his hands. Moonbane had left marks there, tiny tremors, faint discoloration along the veins, as if the toxin had crawled through him and refused to leave. Her healer instincts surged, steadying her breathing. Alara crawled to the shelf, found dried herbs and a vial of oil. She ground leaves between fingers, mixed a paste and returned quietly to his side. She touched his wrist, first testing pulse, warmth, circulation. Then she applied the mixture in slow circles, coaxing the poison outward the way she'd been taught. Draw, don't force. Heal, don't punish. Cale stirred faintly, brow tightening. Alara froze. He didn't wake. She continued, working carefully, her hands sure in ways her heart was not. As she worked, The mate bond hummed under her skin like an answered prayer she didn't deserve. She finished, cleaned her hands, and before she could stop herself watched him breathe. Watched the rise and fall of his chest. Watched the war inside his face soften in sleep. And something broke loose inside her, quiet and terrifying. Not guilt. Not penance. A fragile, unwanted tenderness. At dawn, the wall returned. Alara's body shifted back into Wolf form without her permission, like her mind snapped the cage shut again. She woke in fur, mute, trapped, and Kale was awake too, sitting with his back against the wall. His blind gaze angled toward her. "You're still here," he said. Alara held his stare, heart thudding. Kale exhaled through his nose. "So am I." Days became a strange rhythm. Kale did not call guards. He did not throw her out. He moved through the manor with a Wolf's stubborn pride, but he started listening. To her paws on stone. To her breath. To the way she positioned herself at his left side when his right was too close to a stair edge. He began to depend on her without ever admitting it. When he walked, she walked first, testing paths, nudging him away from sharp corners. When he grew frustrated, she stayed close, silent, steady, a living anchor. When nightmares jolted him awake sweating and snarling, she pressed her weight against him until his breathing slowed. In that quiet, the power between them inverted. Kale Thornful Alpha, ruler Storm, became a man in darkness guided by a wordless Wolf. And Alara rejected Omega, scorned healer, became the one who led him. Sometimes, in the hours before dawn when the manor was still and the wall in her mind loosened, she shifted back and worked on him again. Always while he slept. Always without a voice. Always careful not to leave traces that could identify her. Each night, she drew a little more poison out. Each morning, Kale's senses sharpened by fractions he didn't understand. He heard better. Smelled more. Moved with fewer stumbles. And with every improvement, his shame grew sharper too, because it meant he had been weak, and weakness was something Ironcliff taught its leaders to despise. One evening, as rain tapped the windows like fingers, Kale spoke into the dark. "Do you know what they say about me?" he asked. Alara lay at his feet, Wolf form, ears lifted. Kale's mouth twisted. "They say I'm mad. That I've gone feral. That I'm hiding because I'm afraid." His voice roughened. "They don't say the truth." Alara stayed still. Kale's fingers clenched around the edge of the table. "The truth is I can't stand being seen like this," he rasped. An alpha who can't see his own territory. An alpha who can't smell lies properly. An alpha who, his breath hitched, who has to be led like an old dog. Alara rose and placed her head on his knee. Kale went quiet. His hand found her fur, fingers sinking in. "You shouldn't be here," he murmured, and the words sounded less like threat now, more like grief. "You should have run." Ilara's chest tightened. He didn't know that she had tried. He didn't know the chain inside her ribs always pulled her back. Then the threat arrived, not with claws but with paper. A messenger came at midday, boots echoing in the hall. Kale stiffened at the sound. His beta's voice followed, controlled, cautious. "My alpha," the beta said from the doorway. "There's news." Kale's jaw tightened. "Speak." A pause. Then, "The arranged mate contract has been finalized. Lady Maris of Stonevine will arrive within the week." The words landed like a stone dropped into deep water. Ilara's Wolf rose. Inside her chest, something went cold. Kale didn't speak for a long moment. When he did, his voice was carefully blank. "I never agreed. It was signed before the poisoning worsened," the beta replied quietly. "The council believes it will stabilize the territory. They believe you need it." Kale's nostrils flared. Rage rose, sharp and bitter. "They believe a woman's presence will make me less broken," he said. "How convenient." The beta hesitated. "It's political. It's expected." Kale's hand trembled once on the table. "Get out." The door closed. Silence swallowed the room. Alara felt the mate bond flare, frantic and possessive in a way that terrified her. Her instincts howled, "Mine." Her mind answered with guilt. He would hate you if he knew. Kale sat very still, breathing shallowly, as if any deeper breath would crack him open. Alara backed away. For the first time since the trap, she considered leaving. Not because she wanted to. Because staying would mean watching him belong to someone else. Watching him choose politics over fate. Watching the pack's hatred sharpen into something final when her identity surfaced. Alara's pause carried her toward the doorway before she fully decided. Kale's head lifted instantly. "Don't," he said soft, raw, almost not an order. "Don't leave." Alara froze. Kale's blind gaze turned toward her, searching. "I don't know who you are," he murmured. "I don't know why you came. I don't even know why you stayed." His throat worked. Pride fought the next words and lost. "But when you're not here," he said, voice rough as torn cloth, "the dark feels worse." Alara's breath shuddered. Her paw lifted, hovering half-step from the exit. The easiest thing would be to run. To return to the road of shame where pain was familiar and safe. To let him heal without ever knowing her name. To avoid the inevitable moment when he regained sight and saw Frostwind blood standing too close. Alara turned back. Slowly, deliberately, she crossed the room and lay down beside his chair again, pressing her shoulder against his shin like a vow. Kale exhaled, a sound that almost broke. His hand found her fur and stayed there, fingers curling as if holding on. Alara closed her eyes. She did not know how this ended. She only knew what she was choosing. Healing over escape. Him over her fear. Even if it destroyed her. And as the manor's shadows deepened around them, Alara made herself a promise she wasn't sure she could keep. Before the week ended, she would either save Kale Thornfell completely, or lose him to the light. The first thing Kale saw was not a face. It was light, thin and wrong, like water shimmering over stone. It seeped through the cracks in his darkness in a way that made him recoil, not because it hurt, but because it felt impossible. He blinked. Again. His lashes scraped dryness. His eyes watered, furious at the betrayal. For so long, sight had been a memory, something he carried like an old wound. And now the world dared to return in fragments. A blurred shape hovered near the hearth. Candle flame, maybe. The edges bled into shadow. Kale's hand tightened on the armrest. His breathing turned shallow, controlled. Hope was a dangerous thing. It made you careless. He tested it like a warrior tests ice slowly, with weight distributed. He turned his head toward the window where the curtains were drawn. The seam between them glowed faintly. Color. Not just brightness color. A dull, smoky blue. A gray-green smear. Kale swallowed hard. Fear rose behind his ribs, sharp as an old instinct. If this was a trick, if Moonbane was giving him one last cruel hallucination before taking the rest, he would not survive the disappointment. He sat very still, fists clenched until his knuckles burned. Then he heard it. The soft, steady breathing near the pallet by the hearth. The wolf. His silent companion. Kale's throat tightened. For days she had been his shadow and his guide, his anchor in the manor's shifting dark. He had felt her presence like warmth against winter. He had learned the sound of her paws. The weight of her head on his knee. The calm in her silence that soothed his rage better than any counsel promise ever could. He turned his head toward her. The world swam. At first he saw only a shape dark against the floor, a curl of fur. Then the shape changed. His vision sharpened by a fraction, and the outline he expected was gone. There was a woman on the pallet. Bare shoulder rising with breath. Hair spilled like ink over the blanket. A familiar red cloak folded nearby, its color deep and unmistakable, even through blur wine dark, like a vow. Kale stopped breathing. His heart recognized her before his mind could place her. Something ancient and brutal moved in his blood, an instinct older than pride. Mine. He didn't speak. Didn't move toward her. A single sound would wake her, and Kale couldn't trust what would spill out of his mouth if she opened her eyes and looked at him. Because he could see. Not well. Not clearly. But enough to know that the Wolf who had led him through darkness had a human face. Enough to know he hadn't imagined the tenderness. Enough to know he was standing on the edge of something that would change everything. Kale rose without waking her. He moved carefully, feeling the room with his feet, but now guided by faint sight. The manor's shadows shifted around him like uneasy ghosts. His chest ached. Too full. His skin felt too tight. He left the chamber quietly, closing the door with a gentleness that felt foreign to his hands. In the corridor, he leaned against the cold stone and stared at nothing, eyes watering. He should have demanded answers. He should have dragged guards from their beds. He should have been furious. Instead, he pressed his palm to his sternum, as if he could hold his heart in place. Because even without clarity, even without certainty, his body had already decided. And that terrified him more than blindness ever had. By midday, Ironcliff Manor woke into a different kind of tension. The air smelled of arrival horses, cold steel, polished leather. Voices echoed in the entry hall. Footsteps moved with purpose instead of quiet caution. Servants hurried. Guards stood straighter. Elara, in Wolf form, prowled the upper corridor, unease crawling beneath her fur. Kale had been different since morning. He had spoken less, touched her head less. But when he did glance toward her, those eyes that had always looked through her, now they seemed to catch on her shape, as if the world had begun to hold edges again. Fear sat in Elara's belly like swallowed ice. She kept away from him as much as she could without leaving him unguided. She didn't dare shift in his presence. Not now. Not when his sight was returning like dawn creeping under a door. Then she heard it. A voice bright, confident floating up the stairwell. I expected the manor to be larger, the woman said, amused, as if Ironcliff itself were a mild disappointment. But I suppose bleakness is a style. Elara froze. Beta's reply came calm and strained. Lady Maris of Stonevine. Welcome. Bootsteps followed, measured, elegant. The subtle clink of jewelry. The scent of expensive oils cutting through the manor's cold. Elara backed into shadow, heart hammering. Maris was real. Not just paper and threat. Flesh and expectation. Her voice sharpened with entitlement. I will see my mate. A pause. Then Kale's voice low, controlled, too careful. I am not your mate. Silence hit like a struck bell. Maris laughed softly, as if humoring a child. We have an agreement. The council has a seal. Your territory needs stability. Your weakness. Kale's breath turned audible. The sound of restraint thinning. Do not speak that word in my home. Elara's claws dug into stone. Weakness. Kale had said it about himself in the dark, voice raw with shame. Hearing it used like a weapon lit something inside her that was not healer's mercy. Maris continued, unbothered. You're an alpha, Kale Thornful. You don't get to sulk. You get to lead. And if you cannot see, then you can at least appear whole beside me. Elara's Wolf growl rose without permission, low, vibrating, dangerous. Footsteps halted. Someone muttered, what was that? Elara's ears flattened. She should retreat. She should hide. She should be nothing. But the bond surged, violent and possessive, and behind it came the old familiar poison of humiliation, watching someone claim him like a prize while she stood voiceless and unseen. Elara moved before she chose. She burst down the stairwell in Wolf form like a shadow given teeth, silent except for the scrape of claws on stone. She emerged into the entry hall where Ironcliff's wolves stood in a semicircle. Guards, servants, council members, all turned toward Kale and the woman in traveling furs. Maris of Stonevine stood tall and flawless, chin lifted, eyes assessing. Kale stood opposite her. And he was standing straight. Not supported. Not hidden. Elara's breath caught. His eyes were open, and though they were still shadowed with healing, they were no longer empty. He could see. She took 2 steps forward, hackles raised, lips peeling back from teeth. The hall tensed instantly, guards shifting, hands moving toward weapons. Maris's eyes widened with disgust. Is that animal permitted inside? Alara lunged. Not to kill. To drive her back. To protect what instinct screamed was hers. Before her paws could hit stone, Kale moved. He didn't shout. Didn't dominate. He stepped into her path with absolute certainty and caught her by the scruff, not harshly, not like restraint, but like an embrace disguised as control. His hand sank into her fur. And instead of throwing her aside, he pulled her close. The hall went silent. Ironcliff wolves stared as their alpha, once a rumor sealed in darkness, stood with his palm resting on a Wolf's neck as if it belonged there. As if she belonged there. Alara froze, trembling, shock rippling through her. Kale's thumb moved once against her fur, small, absent, intimate. Enough, he said quietly. Not to her. To the room. To the world. His gaze lifted, finding faces. The shock around him was a living thing, wolves who had not seen him in weeks, now watching him touch an intruder with something that looked dangerously like affection. Maris recovered first, lips curling. So that's what this is, she said, voice sharp with disdain. You hide in darkness and keep a pet. Kale's jaw tightened. Do not call her that. Maris lifted her chin higher. Then what is she? Kale looked down at Alara. His eyes still healing, still uncertain, traced the shape of her muzzle, the line of her ears, the dark streaks of fur along her back. And something in his face changed. Recognition didn't come as a single lightning strike. It came as pieces locking into place. The scent he couldn't name before, now sharpened by returning senses. The presence in his tower. The pull in his ribs. The way his body moved toward her before pride could speak. Kale's breath hitched. Alara, he whispered. The name left his mouth like a truth dragged from deep water. Alara's body jolted. The hall erupted, low gasps, murmurs, snarls beginning to form. Frostwin? Someone hissed. Did he say Frostwin? Kale's gaze lifted slowly, meeting the beta's stunned stare, then the council's rigid faces, then the guards who had turned Alara away 100 mornings. His voice rose, not loud, but carrying. This Wolf, he said, hand still in her fur, came into my dark when all of you were too afraid to admit I needed help. Myra stepped forward, furious. Kale. He cut her off with a look. She pulled me out of Moonbane's rot with her own hands. The room shifted, disbelief rippling like wind through pines. Kale continued, voice steadying as certainty built. She guided me through my own home when I couldn't see my way to a door. She stayed when she could have fled. She endured your hatred daily, without ever begging you to understand. Ilara's chest burned. She wanted to shift. To speak. To deny it before it became a weapon they could turn on him. But the wall in her mind trembled. The old scar Valor left behind, whispering. You're a traitor. You're poison. You don't deserve this. Alara shook, pain and fear grinding together. Kale sensed it. His hand tightened gently, grounding. Then he did something Alara didn't expect. He dropped to one knee beside her. An alpha kneeling was unheard of. A declaration without words. His voice softened, meant only for her now. I see you, he said. The words shattered something inside her. Alara's breath came in a sobbing rush. The wall in her mind cracked wide enough for human form to spill through. Bones shifted. Fur retreated. In the center of Ironcliff's entry hall, Alara became herself, barefoot, trembling, cloak red against stone, hair loose, eyes bright with terror. Gasps erupted again, louder this time. Frostwin, someone spat. Kale stood with her, turning his body slightly so he shielded her from the worst of their stares. Maris's face twisted. You're choosing her? After what her pack did to you? Alara flinched as if struck. Valor's voice surged, eager. Say nothing. Shrink. Let them crush you. It's what you deserve. Kale spoke before Alara could drown in it. Yes, he said simply. I am choosing her. The words fell into the hall like a blade sunk into wood. The council began at once, outraged, urgent. This is madness. The contract. The pack will not accept. Kale's gaze swept them, calm and lethal. Then the pack will learn, he said. You wanted me whole. This is me whole. Maris's hands clenched. Kale. Kale's voice turned colder. There will be no mating to you. There will be no claim. Leave my territory. Maris stared, stunned by the public humiliation. Then her expression hardened. You'll regret this. Kale didn't blink. Go! She left in a storm of fur and offended pride, escorted by guards whose faces looked like they'd forgotten how to breathe. When the doors slammed shut behind her, the manor seemed to exhale. But the danger remained. Alara stood trembling, the weight of every stare pressing down. Vaylor's echo whispered again, softer now, almost tender. They will never forgive you. He will hate you when the bond fades. Run before you're destroyed. Alara closed her eyes. And for the first time, she answered that voice not aloud, but with the clearest truth she'd ever held. You don't get to choose for me anymore. She opened her eyes. Kale's hand found hers, fingers rough, warm, real. You will not touch her, he said to the room, voice carrying. You will not throw stones. You will not spit her name. Any Volf who cannot obey that can challenge me and lose. Silence held. Not acceptance. Not forgiveness. But something that mattered more than either. A boundary. A choice made in daylight. Healing didn't become easy after that. It became honest. Some wolves refused to look at Alara. Some obeyed Kale's command with clenched jaws and hatred barely leashed. The council seethed. Rumors multiplied. The past did not disappear because love existed. But Kale's sight continued returning in steady waves, each day a fraction clearer. He walked the territory again, first with Alara at his side, then with his beta, then alone when pride demanded he prove he could. Alara healed where she could. Some accepted her hands because pain is persuasive. Others spat Frostwind like a curse and kept limping rather than let her touch them. Kale did not force affection. He forced peace. And slowly the manor's windows opened. Curtains were drawn back. Fires were lit. Light returned not as comfort, but as defiance proof that Ironcliff would not hide its wounds anymore. In time, Alara began to sleep without flinching at every sound. Kale stopped waking with claws half extended. The mate bond, still fierce, still complicated, settled into something steadier. Trust earned daily, not granted by fate. And one morning, weeks later, dawn came as it always had, frost on the ground, mist in the trees. But the road was empty. No wolves gathered. No chorus of scheduled cruelty. No stones waiting in cold hands. Alara stood at the tree line in her red cloak and looked down the path that had once been her punishment. Kale stepped beside her, his eyes clear enough now to see her fully. He didn't speak at first. He simply took her hand and held it, steady and quiet. The past remained behind them like an old scar, visible, real, not erased. But the road ahead was open. And for the first time, Alara walked it without counting.